All right, hello everyone. Welcome to an amazing episode of Outside the Studio. I am your host. My name is Tessa. I'm so honored to speak with this guest today and to share her amazing work with you all, dear listeners. I have the honor of hosting Elizabeth Gould. Received a BA in art history from Stanford University and worked in the old masters art world in New York City for several years. So after obtaining an MS in education from SUNY, she became a rites of passage educator for girls and women and the director of a nonprofit committed to positive menstrual menopausal education and awareness. The themes in The Well of Truth, which is a book that Elizabeth just penned, which we'll talk in depth about today. This book grew organically out of her 2 decades of experience as a mother, a teacher, and a menstrual activist, as well as her love of mythology, goddess traditions, and the moon. She is devoted to finding the magic and beauty hidden in daily life. She is thrilled to be part of the rising chorus of voices reclaiming and celebrating the wisdom of the feminine. Hell yeah, that's my own insert, not in Elizabeth's bio. And although she is an inveterate traveler, Elizabeth feels most at home in, oh my gosh, I need your help with saying this. What city in New Zealand?
Aotearoa is the Maori indigenous name for the land of New Zealand.
That's so beautiful. Say it one more time for me.
Aotearoa. It means the land of the long white cloud.
Oh, that's so beautiful. You could just repeat that over and over again. That could be the podcast. So The Well of Truth is her first book. Elizabeth, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah. Oh, it's seriously my honor. When I got this book in my hands, I have this kind of, I love books. I've always had a book in my hand ever since I can remember. I love to read, and when I say a book, I mean an actual paper book. I'm not someone who reads a Kindle or on a technology device. I have to have the book because I love the way it feels and smells. And oftentimes I'll just kind of I'll be in the middle of reading something. I don't know if you do this. I'll close the book and I'll look at the cover and I'll just kind of reread the synopsis again. And it's just this whole experience. Side tangent about my love of books. And so I'm saying that because when I got your book, it's for me, I haven't ever read this style of writing. So I'll let you tell the listeners, Elizabeth, a little bit about the style of writing, because when I got it, I thought, oh, these are essays, they're short stories. And so I flipped it open and I started reading a chapter in the middle, Burning Down the House. And I realized, oh, this is a continuous thread. So it's called a vignette of stories, right? So can you tell me about that process of writing and why you chose this particular style for this book?
Absolutely. So this book actually started as a creative project for myself while I was busy raising a family. Mm-hmm. And I've always loved to write. I've always kept a journal, and I've held this question for a long time about how, as a modern world, do I live in this fast-paced culture and have a space for my soul to kind of feel a sense of meaning and authenticity. How do I move through the motions of all of these rituals we have, such as giving birth or getting married, sitting at the deathbed of a friend? How is that held within me? And so I looked at writing chapter by chapter, just a little snapshot into the life of a modern woman, and trying to figure out where's that little bit of magic, where's that place where she steps out of three-dimensional reality into a more mythic version of herself, and she's connected with the great cosmic rhythms, and she feels herself not just on the hamster wheel of life, but that she's actually engaged in a very deep way. And so that's how it started. And pretty soon I started stringing them together and realizing that they made a cohesive unit. And to be said that when I shopped the book around, people were like, wait, it's not a novel, it's not quite short stories, it's kind of different. And even the subject matter, it's, people don't talk about spirituality in so commonly or openly. And so it kind of fell through the cracks, but I thought, aha, that's a very important place, because if I'm feeling the need for it, certainly other people are as well.
Yeah, so I love to read and write poetry, and one phrase that always comes up to me when I think about this that you're exactly talking about and the way that you wrote this book is the idea of the magic within the mundane, the everyday life, breathing the mythology, the goddess, the feminine, the spirituality into the essence of doing my email, washing my dishes, doing my laundry, and how can that be this? I just love that. I found that to be such a nice surprise as I read your book. It also makes me think of one of my other favorite authors, which is Clarissa Pinkola Estes, which her stories are very much myth, and there's always kind of a lesson or a moral in there. Which brings me to my next question. I'm wondering, is there a moral to the story? And the moral doesn't have to be singular, but it seems like there's this underlying message that you beautifully describe by way of prose and metaphor. And I'm wondering if there was one sort of central moral that you were trying to draw out there.
I would say that, kind of as an organizing principle throughout the book, something that's very important to me, especially as a woman, and I think that this appeals to everyone, that trying to exactly stay in touch with our inner rhythms, the nature, the more feminine values of, patience and nurturance and love and care and stewarding the earth and all of these things that feel so important to me, that what does that look like in reality? How to hold that kind of space in a world that's definitely going through some kind of you know pangs of change, and how to hold that feminine, how to keep my ear tuned to the wisdom of the natural world. To me, that's sort of the moral of the story, if there was such a thing, is that how can I embody this place of like rest, deep rest, tuning inside and knowing what's right for me, and in the moment, how to tap into my intuition and not always feel bombarded by all of the external forces and the societal expectations. Like, how can I tune into that really deep, nourishing part of myself? And so that's what I encourage. Like, oh, let's explore this thing that as women begin to become more aware and more in touch with ourselves, it's like, oh, there's a lot of power there that we hold, but not power over, but power with. Like, we want power over ourselves so that we can be truly alive. And in this moment in history, this is the game. This is,
Yeah.
let's be fully alive and meeting whatever it is that we need to face on this planet.
Yeah. I definitely want to touch on, if you will, I'm not sure I want to go there just yet because I feel like it'll take us off the topic of the book, and I want to continue on that for just a little bit longer. But I want to put a pin in the conversation around advocating for girls and women, for rites of passage, for menstrual health, for menopausal education and awareness. That's definitely something I want to touch, and I feel like it's so relevant right now with what is going on. And it's such a hot topic. It's so close to my heart. I can only imagine it is to yours too, with things like Roe v. Wade and, the direction, at least in the United States. I'm not sure what it looks like from New Zealand looking out at the rest of the world to you, but I'd love to touch on that in just a little bit. So I'm going to preface that, put a pin in it, and come back to it.
Very good.
What I want to ask you, though, is as the protagonist of the story, Grace, I'm wondering how much of this is autobiographical, if you would feel inclined to share.
Absolutely. Well, in order for the stories to feel authentic and, from my heart, I definitely identify with Grace. We have a lot of common interests, and the stories generally are grounded in an experience that either I am familiar with or that is somehow someone close to me is familiar with. And so I would start off with that very grounded sense of like, this is the scenario. And then I kind of just let it go and just waited to see what wanted to show up, who had something they wanted to say about it. And so it had the underpinnings in real life, and then it just kind of went off into its own direction. And because I feel a connection to Grace, I was able to kind of get into her mind and say, how would she hold this? How would she do this? And I'm a little more eccentric than she is, so I'm like, okay, it's all right, we can do this. But yeah, I definitely identify with her. There's a piece of me that feels connected.
Well, and I'm wondering that part of you that feels connected to nature, spirit, mysticism, these ideas that tend to be, for lack of a better word, I guess a little bit less tangible. How do we... I feel this too in my life. I feel like so many of us can identify. How do we stay connected to the natural world, to that essence of spirit, of myth, if you will, of divinity in our modern day landscape?
Right. And I think we all do little things or maybe big things that connect us. For me, I am tuned into what's going on in the natural world. And the crazy thing is, we are all the world of nature is always giving us so much beauty, so much connection, so much wisdom. You could sit and watch the moon phases every night change. You could watch the water with sunlight on it. You can watch a sunrise or a sunset, and they offer something really deep to the heart and to I think to our souls. So it doesn't need to be anything elaborate as far as like, okay, I'm going to go connect with the natural world. It can, even if you live in an apartment and you just have a house plant that you become closely connected to, or if there's a tree in your neighborhood that you can go and hug on a regular basis, or just even to observe, just to witness the beauty of the world, that is kind of like a doorway into touching into that mythic bigger picture of who we are in the world. I imagine you as a yoga teacher, and that you have so many different ways and rituals of connecting with the seasons and with the moon and your sun salutations that you do every morning. Are there ways that you feel that that really anchor you in that biggest sense of yourself?
Yeah, thank you for asking. One of my favorite practices is to take off shoes and socks and get my feet on the earth, sole of the foot to the earth, in the grass, in the dirt, in the sand, whatever it is, to receive that negative ion charge, to spread my toes, to feel the earth between my toes. That to me is so grounding and it's so connective. And I love hiking. I love backpacking. One of my favorite things to do is take off for a long weekend or a whole week and backpack. That resets me
Mm.
like no other practice. I just
Mm.
feel like I am born again when I come back from backpacking. And it's so interesting because when I get out there into the wilderness, it's like the end of a long day, and I set up my tent. I blow up my little air mattress. It's like an inch thick, and I lay down on that hard, cold ground. You might think it's hard to sleep being out there in the wilderness, and I'll tell you that I've had some of the best nights of sleep on that hard, bumpy rock stuck in my ass ground. And I can wake up the next day feeling so refreshed, hike 15 to 20 miles, and just repeat. It's that re energizing, regenerating for me. Hugging trees, that's another one. You said that. That's another thing. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a hug for me. I can just
Right.
put my hand out and rest my hand on a tree for a little bit, and that really soothes me when I can't take off for a week or a weekend.
That's right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right. It just saying that it doesn't. It can be very simple, um, and it feels like somehow having that intention to go out and be with the natural world is is all it is. You know, you just there, show up, watch, interact, breathe, feel yourself connected to the earth.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, that's so beautiful. So there is, I'm wondering if you would be okay if I read just a short little passage from the book that really resonated with me. And I have a particular question about it.
Very good. You
Okay.
go for it.
So this is from page 82. And let's see, where will I start? Here. Okay. So Grace asks, "Am I dying?" Persephone replied, "You are changing, which is a kind of death." "I'm scared of change." "Lift my veil, daughter," the queen commanded. Slowly and gently, Grace removed the dark fabric that covered the queen's face. Underneath was a dark, empty void. "You see," the queen said tenderly, "there is nothing to be afraid of." Placing a cluster of pomegranate seeds in Grace's hand, Persephone said, "Eat these and remember that life is all about change, which allows you to recreate yourself anew again and again." So, first of all, I just want to pause and let that sink in. Um, and secondly, it resonates in so many different ways, especially as I find myself heading into my 40s and thinking about things like menopause and that particular change in life. And what I love about this story is it goes through like that maiden, mother, crone phase that we as women who identify as women will all go through at some point. And yes, change is scary. And there are many things as I head into this transition in my life that I realize I wasn't really prepared for, that I wish someone would have said, "Hey, be aware of this." And so, you see the queen said tenderly, "There is nothing to be afraid of," which allows you to recreate yourself anew again and again. It's like this invitation, this permission to let go, to surrender, whatever word you want to use, and be grateful for that passage of time and the next stage and phase. And so I don't know if there's really a question in there unless you have something you want to add to that. But I do have a specific question about the pomegranate in this
Okay.
particular chapter.
Okay. I think what I'd like to say just about that, we live in a culture that there's either silence or somewhere of a strong stigma around these natural, normal, healthy processes um, that a woman's body goes through, from being a girl into starting your menstrual cycle and then changing again when you go through perimenopause and menopause. So it's it's a time when a lot of women are like, wait, what's happening? When I taught girls at puberty, there are so many times that I would hear mothers or daughters saying, "Oh, I didn't know, and I thought I was dying when I was
Mm-hmm.
bleeding." And I thought that's not okay. Like that there's no information around that it actually have that kind of trauma response. And the same thing with going through menopause. Like how many women are like, I feel like I'm losing my mind and everything is disintegrating. But uh, what would that be like if we had like more of a holding around that for women to like say, this is actually like I'm stepping into my queen aspect. Like I have been through so many life experiences, and now at this moment, I'm stepping into this new aspect of myself. I'm changing into like a deeper, fuller version of myself. And when it's hard to find medical advice, there's just hasn't been a lot of research done about things such as menopause. How can we as women feel really good about it if we feel like we're in the dark?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have so many questions on this topic, but I do want to ask about the pomegranate because it's such a
Okay.
rich visual and it
Mm.
seems very central to this particular passage, this particular
Hmm.
vignette. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but is there significance to the pomegranate here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The pomegranate, with the seeds inside, it's like the container that holds all the possibilities. And throughout history in so many different traditions, the pomegranate has been kind of the symbol of the changeability of the mother. And the story of Demeter and Persephone, that when she eats the seeds, she has to spend time in the underworld. That's part of the bargain. And so when we take this in, we're acknowledging that there's the depth there. That it requires kind of going into the depths and finding our way around there, and not to be afraid of like the queen says when she takes her veil off. It's just this void, like this dark, fertile void womb space that's where all creation happens. In the cycle of life, that there needs to be that place of pause and rest so that something new can be born. And that's what the pomegranate is symbolizing, is part of this process of life, death, rebirth. And we're constantly in this spiral and this dance of change. And we're just learning as we go how to get more familiar and to inhabit that fully.
I love that. I didn't know that about the pomegranate. Very cool. I would love to hear about how you got into the work of education around menstrual cycles, educating for rites of passage for women and girls.
When I had my first period, my mom was lovely, and she gave me what she could. And I just remember holding this big box of pads and going, is this all there is? Like, there's no instructions. There's no, like, it may physically handle how what I'm dealing with, but emotionally, like, how is that held? And so this question of, is that all there is? I know there has to be more to life than these things that have their physical manifestations. And it really kind of set me on a quest to learn more. Like, what does it mean to be a woman? To talk to women, to sit in many women's circles, to learn about goddess archetypes, to read. And you mentioned earlier Clarissa Pinkola Estes' book, Women Who Run with Wolves. I read that, or I started to read that when it first came out. I was so excited because everybody was talking about this book, and I just couldn't get it. It
Yeah.
was over my head, but I really wanted to read it, and so I put it down. And several years later, at a different point in my life, I picked it back up again, and boom, it just made so much sense, and
Mm.
I could I could resonate with that. So it's sort of like that we're all kind of finding our way as we go,
Mm.
and yeah. I just lost my train of thought, but yeah.
It's okay. I have another question on this same subject, which is,
Okay.
what do you wish that your mother would have said? Do you wish that there would have been more of a conversation, a ritual around receiving your period? Is there anything that, or maybe putting it this way, with you're a mother, with educating your children around menstrual cycles, is there anything that you did differently with your
Thank you.
kids?
Yes. Okay. Picking up the red thread again.
Yeah.
Yes. I remember when I was a girl, there was one family that when their daughters had their first period, they would make a big red cake, and I thought, wow, that's really out of my league. I had never heard of such a thing. And yet when I gave birth to two daughters myself, I had that thought. I want to do something different for them. I want them to meet this differently. And so that's kind of how I started getting on the path of working with girls and women at these different rites of passage. And so I really just wanted it to be about like an honoring and a welcoming, and studying different indigenous cultures to see the ways that young girls were taken and by the wise women, and taught very practical things, how to read the stars, how to use plant medicine, how to care for a child, how to do all of these things. But then there was also the challenge. Like, you had to run a long distance, you had to stay up all night dancing around the fire, learning the songs of the culture, preparing a feast for the whole village. All of these different ways stepping, out of the childhood into being a member of the community, and responsible adulthood. There were so many markers, and we don't really have those same things, but there's many good people and organizations out there that are really trying to and working on making a space for people to step into their maturity.
Mm.
And when we can do that, then that just makes us able to work together better, and that we can have a positive impact in the outcomes that we'd like to see here on this dear planet Earth.
Yeah, yeah, rite of passage, I feel like is something that is definitely seems to be lost in our, at least I feel that loss. I remember growing up, well, my parents were very interested in Native American culture, and what I remember from learning about Native American culture is there was a very distinct rite of passage from, and I'm thinking of boyhood to manhood, where they would go off into the wilderness on a vision quest, and basically, in essence, be asked to find themselves and to make that step very clear into manhood as a rite of passage. And I remember reading these stories and feeling like, wow, what would that be like to have that sort of it's almost like this, it's this thrilling thing, it's this really scary thing, but also very, like, there's this wall of confidence behind you. This is how I imagine it anyways, of these elders who have gone before you, who believe in you, who trust that you can make that journey, who can see farther than you can see because they've been there and done that, and they know it's possible. That kind of confidence stepping from adolescence to adulthood, I feel like would do us a world of favors as
Absolutely.
a collective, mature society. So
Hmm.
I wonder about in your education around this topic, menstruation, menopause. How do you speak to young women? How do you speak to adult women? How do you speak to mature women about these practices and educate them?
Uh, I have found that with young girls, they're they're sort of excited and they don't know what's coming, but there's that kind of frisson of I'm going to become a woman someday, and so there's this openness. I often find that with um, women who have daughters entering puberty, there can often be quite a bit of fear because they they want to do something different but they don't know how, and so there's this sense of like I'm worried, and then in older generations, and I'm generalizing here, there can be a sense of we don't talk about these things,
Mm.
you know, don't talk about it. Um, so we're kind of in an interesting place where uh, there's a lot of different attitudes going on. Uh, but I see that as a positive, and so whenever I've done work with, let's say, girls and their mom, it's also for the mothers to reimagine their experience if they had a difficult transition into you know becoming a young woman, that how to touch into that maiden self and to honor that and to surround it with so much love and beauty. And we always make sure we do storytelling, and there's always a feast at the end, so that it's in some way a recreation of what it is like to have a woman's lodge, and to invite the young and the wisdom of the elders all together. And so there's a lot of brave women out there that are saying, well, I don't know how to do it, but I'm gonna just try.
Mm.
I'm gonna make this happen in some way, and so there's a lot that's kind of percolating to help support and to kind of ennoble the experience of being a woman in a culture that doesn't necessarily that has a lot of parameters around what it can be, what it has to look like,
Mm-hmm.
and to really bring it back into ourselves and celebrate the cycles that are in us.
Yeah. I, so I want to, I keep kind of in my head, I'm having this argument about whether or not to touch a particular subject. And I mentioned Roe v. Wade, and I
Mm.
mentioned what feels to me like the future of being female may or may not look like for the next 10, 20 years, and maybe beyond. With some historic laws that are being changed right now in the United States. I'm curious, this is probably a multi-pronged question, but number one, I'm curious what it looks like from where you are in the world watching all of this happen, um, from an
The,
outside perspective, I guess.
I was listening to a radio program yesterday, and the announcer was talking about is it true what's going on in the states right now with Roe v. Wade, because the rest of the world looks to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Looking what's going on there, what's the temperature there, and the newscaster said something about, is this real? If this is happening, well, that's it. I'm just like, I'm just walking away from that place. And I thought, well, yeah, it's from this vantage point, people are like, that's outrageous. How can that happen? So, um, I think everyone's looking at this like just sort of on tenterhooks, like,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
it's almost unfathomable that it's happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how it feels to me. I guess I'm not alone in that. And not to ostracize anyone who believes one thing over the other,
Right.
but I do personally want the sovereignty over my own body and the right to choose. Which I think is what everyone wants for their own body. I would assume, maybe unfoundedly assume, that that's what we all want is sovereign bodies, a sense of freedom. And so I heard a friend was kind of recounting to me that as women, they were collectively talking about this particular subject, and one argument was this is the beginning of what's not really about abortion per se, but what is more about women's rights to privacy, to having the right to make a choice for their body privately.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one perspective. And then the other perspective, which I thought was, oh, this one kind of was like, oh, that's interesting. The other perspective was that this is something that will, it's in the news right now, but it'll blow over. Nobody's really taking it seriously. It's just one of those things that's making a lot of noise right now, but it's not going to make any sort of lasting effect. What are your thoughts on this?
I feel that there's some kind of push pull going on in the world, like with women definitely in our lifetimes having made tremendous strides forward in certain areas, and and then there's like the counterforce that's trying to like push, like the more we stand forward, the more there's that energy that's trying to like pull us back. Like I don't know, I just kind of feel that. And um, I I think of that too, sort of with the rise of you know pornography and more kind of misogynistic content, like, oh well, here women are taking STEM classes, and there's all of these like girl empowerment, and then there's this sort of like this dark underground force that's like, we're gonna like take you down this way. And so there's it's a very dynamic time. And I really don't have an answer, but I do feel like we as we're rising, there's some force that's been at play for a very long time that's trying to keep things back. And I'm deep in my heart like hopeful that we can ride these waves and we can make our way through them, because it feels like now is the time for women to be saying like, enough, no more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as sovereign beings, we've let so many things slide in the name of being nice, of like not causing problems, of just going with the flow, of not hurting anybody's feelings. And there's something different that's being asked of women now.
Yeah. Whew. It's a heavy
Yeah.
topic, but I feel like it's one it's scary to talk about, especially on a public platform like this.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's warranted because it's that, like you said, it's too late to be nice. It's too late to go with the flow. We need more than that. We need more than just passivity of acquiescing to the status quo. I think you're absolutely spot on. So thank you for sharing. I know that's kind of a vulnerable topic to touch, but I felt called to ask you. So I guess where I'd like to, so you've done a lot of research and study, and in particular for the book, it's apparent with archetypes, goddess. myth around the divine feminine. I'm wondering if there are any that we can call on here that you really resonated with in writing the book to help us anchor into that sovereignty, to that power, to that sense of, no, this is what is right for me, and this is what I will stand for, and this is what I will not stand for.
Kali, creator, preserver, destroyer, which is the Hindu goddess that's a little terrifying. She, embodying the frequencies of red, white, and black. She is in so many ways that sense that taken when I take it personally, that she's going to create new scenarios, new possibilities. She's going to preserve those things that are important, powerful, our gifts. And she's going to cut off those things that no longer serve us. And all the ways that I play small, or that I don't speak my truth, or that I'm not living out what I came to do here on this earth. So I, in the story of burning down the house, she had a role in playing of getting Grace, who was going through divorce and just kind of just feeling soggy. She just had not a lot of energy to move one way or another. And Kali came with this with her, kind of wild way, and got Grace back in touch with this like fire inside her, with the rage that she had to like move through in order to have that space cleared out to move forward. And I know we don't, as women, like, anger and like those are things that we kind of like look at with like, it's not okay to be angry. But the power of sacred rage, where you're not hurting anybody, but you're just tapping into that volcano inside of you, and realizing there's so much energy that we have to put for the benefit of all life. Because as creatrix, like, we want to hold the highest good for every living thing. And so although Kali is not necessarily the most picture perfect one in the pantheon of goddesses, man, she delivers. So grateful for that tough love, that fierce beauty, that power that emanates from her, and how that feeds the fire within us to move us forward.
How do we tap into our sacred rage? As you mentioned that chapter, I remember really feeling like, yes, this is something that we need to talk about. This is something that we need to educate around. And I mean, even just anger in general as an emotion that is so important, that it has so much, what is the word? Purpose, I would say. How do we tap into our sacred anger in a world that tells us anger is not okay?
Right. Great question. I'll tell you what I like to do. And that is, I will go out to a place, where there aren't people around, and maybe find a dead tree log, or, something that's not an actual tree, but like a branch, and I'll just hit it with the stick. But I go into this experience with kind of a ceremonial element of, I'll go and I'll acknowledge the elements. I will call in Kali to do exactly that, to help me move through all of those stuck places in myself that need to become clear channeled. And I will invoke the sacred in some way, and then I'll just let it rip, with a branch, and just physically move it out, not editing what's coming out of my mouth, and just, sounding whatever I have to do, and until I just get to the point where I'm just like, whoa, just I'm absolutely spent, and it is such a transformative exercise, and you can do it if you want with another person, where you take turns, where you hold space for them and kind of make sure that people aren't walking by or something. Just kind of energetically can hold space for each other and take turns, and that too is really a beautiful way to share with someone. And so that's just my suggestion. But I'm sure there's lots of ways. Beating
That
up a
sounds
pillow,
yeah. Screaming in your car really loud.
Oh yes, that is a good one too. That's a good one too.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's just more. I think it's more just getting in touch, because it like opens this doorway that all of a sudden you're filled with energy, and it's energy that's available to be used, that maybe before was like tamped down or kind of secreted over here, kind of disjointed. But and then one thing that's always important is at the end to give thanks, and to feel the earth, that you're a conduit for the energies of the earth and the heavens, and it's like, whew, then you feel your sovereignty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious about, as I think about my own life, the trajectory that has gotten me to where I am today, there are so many mentors along the way that have taught me so many things, whether or not they were, a mentor that they knew they were being a mentor to me, or just like a teacher or somebody that I saw doing something that I knew I could emulate, or once I saw them doing it, I realized I could emulate. And I feel like mentors and teachers are so important in our lives. I'm wondering if you have one or two that really has helped you along this path, that stick out for you.
How much time do we have to name them all?
All day.
Okay. Well, yes, so many people that have walked with me along the way. There is one woman who comes to mind who is my call her my fairy godmother. She's a writer and a poet, and just multi-dimensional being, and she has been the one who really encouraged me with my writing, who saw me as a writer much longer than I could. She was like, "You're doing this. You're gonna have this book published," and she would always relate to me, about the craft of writing, and she'd always she still does create opportunities for me to either read the story or to share about the stories, and and I just feel like, how lucky am I to have someone in my life that's just right there, like my little cheering section, to like, this is happening, you're doing this now, and it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a blessing to have those teachers in our lives that see the potential in us, and they help bring it out in us. That being said, one thing that I always like to ask, in kind of a roundabout way. So I mentioned I'm a lover of poetry. One of my favorite poems by Mary Oliver, just one stanza that sticks out to me all the time is, tell me what it is. Now I'm getting tongue tied. Tell me, what is it you will do with this one wild and precious life? And that's something that I have it on my website. I have it on a sticky note. It's something that I ask myself since I can remember. Well, since my mom is the one that brought that to my attention in a note. She left it in a note as I was moving out for college.
Oh,
And since then, I
how beautiful.
often, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a wise woman. And so I always like to use that as kind of a last prompt to ask you, Elizabeth, what is next? What are you excited about? This is your first book. Is there a next book in the works?
Well, the way that the book was written is not to be a spoiler alert, but it is an open-ended, ending, so that there's a possibility that she may continue on her journey into the unknown, as kind of a follow-up book. I am so interested in mythology and how mythological stories can be felt and understood in our modern society. So I have a couple ideas of myths I'd like to work with, and then I have a niece who really would like to write a young adult book together. So that might be fun.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, lots of different things.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Is there any last thing that you want to share with the audience? Something that you hope that they take away from either the book? If they haven't picked it up yet, please do. The Well of Truth by Elizabeth Gould. It's well worth it. It's something that you can return to over and over again, and it's a beautiful book to have right by your bed. Is there anything that you wish people would take away from this conversation or that book or both?
I would say that it seems to me that just having the willingness to look at your life and all of the stories, all of the experiences, all of the things that maybe weren't the way you thought they would be, as looking at them with the eyes of love, with seeing that you're doing this life in your own way. There's no one else in the world quite like you, and how can you move through it and see the gifts that it's offering you, and what does it take for you to step into the most mythic aspect of yourself? And it feels like this book maybe just gives some examples of what that could look like, and I originally thought it would be sort of like a book of meditations where you could just read one, and as you felt that you wanted to, but it's also kind of dipping into this well of what feels good. Like I don't know, when I go into a bookstore, I often just say to the person at the front, like, real life is just so much. Can I just have like a book that feels really good?
Oh, I love that idea.
And so it's a little bit like that. It's there's challenge and trials and tribulations in the book, perhaps that many people can relate to, and but at the end you want to feel like you've just had this like drink of cool, refreshing water, and that it just kind of nourishes you that way. So I send my love and encouragement for everyone stepping on their paths. They've maybe been walking it for quite a while. Just keep going. Yeah,
that's beautiful. I love this. I wrote it down. What does it take to step into the most mythic aspect of yourself? That's my takeaway.
Okay. Excellent.
Elizabeth, it's been such a pleasure and honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Well, everyone, that concludes another amazing episode of Outside the Studio. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something new, maybe remembered something old, maybe felt inspired to apply something to your life. You can hear my dog in the background. She's doing a little happy dance. So Daisy enjoyed it. Anyhow, I wanted to just pop in here to wrap us up to say a couple of things. Number one, I have such an amazing team that helps me put these podcasts together. Without them, I wouldn't be able to bring these amazing conversations to you. So thank you to my producer, my director of creative services, my sound editor, my engineer, Consistency Media. Don't know what I would do without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the amazing creation and artistic, musical genius, Drew Lovern. Thank you so much for putting together this music specifically for outside the studio. So unique to the show, only place you're ever going to hear it is right here. Thanks, you guys. You make my world go round. Stay well, everyone. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, share on the socials, especially if it's a show that you think, hey, this could help somebody else. That's what this is all about, right? We're sharing information so that we're better, so that we're inspired, so that we're lifting each other up, and we're learning how to be in this world, living on this planet to the best of our ability, sharing information and inspiring one another. And that's my hope. That's my hope for the show. Take care.